This is the Expeditions Podcast. I'm Tim Harden. In this episode, we'll be chatting with Nate Luebbe, a wildlife, landscape, and travel photographer who's been to some of the world's most exciting outdoors destinations. Let's chat with Nate. All right, we're here with Nate Luebbe, a landscape, wildlife, and travel photographer, as I would describe you, but we'll get back into how you might see yourself as a photographer in a second. Welcome to the Expeditions Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So that is the first question. How do you characterize yourself as a photographer?
Man, yeah, that's been the question since like day one, honestly. I I've heard from a lot of people that you kind of have to like narrow down your niche and sort of pigeonhole yourself, but I just bought a camera because I liked to be outside, and when you're outside you're going to see cool stuff and you want to take a photo of it. And so my entire career has just been like going on adventures and taking photos. So I kind of just say nature photography. It's sort of boring and vague, but landscapes, wildlife, sometimes there's people like skiing or mountain biking or something, but I just want to be outside.
That makes sense, and it's funny you say that. That's how I got started with a lot of things like photography and podcasting, is wanting to take photos of places I um, was visiting, and then also I felt like I was chatting with the most interesting people in the world and wanted to record it. So
Yeah, totally.
that's what brings us here. So where are you based out of? I know that for a lot of people, especially in the U.S. West, that can change. But where are you now?
I currently live in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Cool. That's a great place to be, right up against the mountains there. Have you always been in Salt Lake City?
I grew up in Colorado, in like a small little mountain town. Then I moved to Boulder, Colorado for college and stayed there for about 10 years. And then I actually moved out to Seattle for about 5 years, where I met my now fiance, Autumn. And we were there, which was cool, but it was a long drive to the mountains, and I couldn't personally handle the weather. Being from the sunny state of Colorado, Seattle was a little too gray for me. So we're in Utah now.
What was that mountain town in Colorado?
It's called Conifer, which
Oh,
I
cool.
maybe. Oh, wow, I'm amazed if you know where that is. When I was growing up, it was like a single stoplight. I guess it's kind of a town now.
They have a legit Safeway now. They
Yeah.
um when I first started hanging out around Conifer, I had a job. I commuted from Denver to Pine Junction, and I worked at
Oh,
a fly shop there and guided it a little bit. Um, and there was nothing, and then the Safeway opened, and they had people making sushi and stuff, and I couldn't believe it. But
wow. That's actually such a deep cut. I'm so impressed because, like, literally, the Safeway was the only building other than my high school, basically, when I was growing up. Like, literally, I would meet up with my friends in the Safeway parking lot because it was the only parking lot.
that's hilarious. Yeah, it was a big
Um,
deal. Um,
I know now there's like two grocery stores and a hardware store, and they have like was it like a 24-hour fitness or something? It's crazy.
wow, it's out of control.
Yeah, I know. It's almost a city now.
All right, so that follows a highway that goes south, west of Denver, and it's there's that area for me always really felt like the mountain desert. That's like the start of the the West, in the sense that it's a desert. And then Boulder, of course, is a great place to be located for um, anything outdoors related, it seems. So I can understand wanting to be inspired to stay in the outdoors.
Yeah, I was really spoiled in Boulder. That's where I was when I decided to buy my first camera. And I have a real obsessive personality. When I find something I like, it's just like the only thing I can think about for a year at a time.
Right.
And Boulder was such a cool place for that because I like bought a camera. And so every day after work, I could be like a 10-minute drive, I'd be in the mountains and I could take some photos. It was such a good place to practice. It was like zero effort to be somewhere with a beautiful landscape. It was really cool.
It's funny. I'm talking more about myself than I thought I would, but the when I got my first camera, I remember driving up into Boulder Canyon and being like, all right, what do I do now? What do I do with this camera? And finding some climbers and photographing them. But yeah, it's a great place to be. And if all else fails, you've got the flat irons, which are stunning.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I took so many photos just right there in Chautauqua, which was like 5 minutes from my house. And man, I didn't realize at the time how spoiled I was with that, but it really is a special place.
Yeah, that's cool. What happened to your? I was gonna say what happened to your photography when you moved to Seattle, but I guess I should say how did it evolve?
That's fair. Um, Seattle, I mean, Washington State in general is unbelievably beautiful. So it worked out really nicely for me still. It was just a little more effort, basically, like in the city of Seattle. I have no interest in photographing cities, unfortunately. I wish I did because life's a little bit easier that way, I think, in terms of like how far you have to travel. But um, so I just had to do like, like a 2 hour drive to get to the North Cascades or, 3 hours down to Mount Rainier. But the substrate there that you have to work with is unbelievably beautiful.
And I guess you don't have to worry too much about harsh light. um,
Yeah.
so, was there a certain point in which you became, more subject or destination focused, where you thought, I need to go to this place or that place, or you're really seeking out anything from skiers on the face of mountains to um, night sky work. Um, was there any
Yeah.
big event that inspired you or triggered you to go one way or the other?
It felt like sort of a natural progression, like an evolution for me almost, where I think like a lot of people, when I first bought my first camera, I just was excited to point it at anything. And it's like a very common beginner thing where you get your first like wide aperture lens and you see your first photo with bokeh and you're like, well, that's it. I'm a professional. um, and then like as I evolved as a photographer, I started realizing like, okay, having part of the frame out of focus is not all it takes to make a good photo. So I started thinking about compositions a little bit more and lighting, like, oh, I've got to be up for sunrise and sunset. And then, uh, I would like see an elk or a bear or something, and I'd be like, wow, that's really fun. And then the natural progression was like, I'd be outside camping. You're sitting around the campfire and you're like, man, these stars are beautiful. Can I take a photo of those? And so it just sort of was like the natural progression of me as an outdoorsman also begat my natural progression as a photographer, which was really fun.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had this experience, but because it looks like autumn really focuses on a lot of aurora and night sky photography. It- for me, seeing somebody who did that, I thought like, wow, you've got 12 more hours. It's like a whole new world opens up when you realize that you don't necessarily need the light of the sun. Um,
Yeah, yeah. We go to Norway every single February. We teach a Northern Lights photography workshop up there. So people will, they'll come join us and learn night sky photography from us. And it's really funny. Oh, sorry, my cat just knocked one of my camera bags off of a shelf. I don't know if you could hear that in the recording.
no,
Um,
that makes it exciting. Things are
that's
happening.
domestic. Yeah, domestic wildlife, we call it. um, anyhow, yeah. So it's funny when people sign up for that Norway workshop because they see that like so it's February and it's the high Arctic, and so sunrise is 10 a.m. and sunset is 2 p.m. And they're like, well, that is basically not a day.
Yeah.
But then you get like 6 hours of northern lights and it's just staggering. So you end up with like a normal length day, just like wildly varied conditions. And so I think it's really cool. It's like completely different skills, completely different compositions available when the night sky is the subject. And it's, yeah, it's really fun.
And in my opinion, maybe it's because I don't do it very much. That's hard. It's an exciting challenge that requires a lot of work. Not that there isn't normally office work connected to photography or scouting and stuff like that, but a lot goes into each shot in a way that's very different. And so, you could be preparing for Norway now, if it's in February or whatever it is, and it sort of for me feels like it extends the process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it really requires a knowledge of your equipment that I think is deeper than like daytime photography because you don't want to be constantly flipping on your headlamp to look at the buttons. You have to like manually focus on the stars. You have to be really comfortable. Like I could operate my camera with my eyes closed because half the time it feels like that's what I'm doing, and it's kind of a fun way to get with your equipment.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then the post processing is a whole nother beast too. Um,
Yeah, that's its own can of worms for sure.
I was in Banff a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. I don't know, somewhere in there. I still have to edit those photos. It just seems like such an endeavor.
Oh man, yep.
So, where are some of the places you've been? And I know that list is long, but it's pretty exciting.
Oh man, it is a very long list. This year, I've been to the big exciting ones was Hawaii, Norway, Greenland, Botswana, and Namibia.
Wow.
And that was this year, which was really cool. We had a really awesome year this year. We were like really spoiled with some amazing trips and then really fortunate conditions in every location.
What were you doing in Botswana and I already misspoke. What were you doing in Africa?
We were basically I just have never been, and I decided I wanted to,
Yeah,
and that was like that was the start. Autumn woke up one day, and I was like, "We're going to Africa," and she's like,
nice.
"Well, have you? Did we book a project?" And I was like, "No, but it's happening." That goes back to my obsessive personality disorder I was mentioning, where I just if I say I'm going to do something, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, so I just started like sending a bunch of emails and Pangolin Photo Safaris actually emailed me back right away, offered us a huge discount on a trip, and then we decided we were going to make it a workshop. So we treated it like location scouting. So we went out and just literally it was sort of like a vacation, but with the intent of putting together a workshop in the future, which is my favorite way to go because there's no client deliverables. There's no like mandatory editing when you get home. It's like if I have a photo I like, I can share it. Otherwise, it's mine, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, we're putting together a workshop for 2027 out in Botswana. And that place was life changingly good. So, I'm really excited to go back.
What was it about it that made it so good?
Um, I think so. I'm still primarily, I would say, landscape and astro oriented, and the wildlife is like opportunistic. I will see a lot of wildlife, and I think I'm pretty decent at taking photos of them, but I don't often plan like dedicated wildlife trips. And this was that, which I thought was really fun to flex those muscles. And every single day we were there for 11 days, and every single day I saw an animal that I've never seen before,
Cool.
which is unbelievably exciting.
Were there any animals wildlife is my favorite thing? Were there any animals that you were especially psyched to see, or any events or anything that were memorable?
Yeah, I mean, we were excited about all the big charismatic animals like elephants and giraffes and lions, of course. The stuff that I liked the most was that several times we saw animals that not only had I never seen before, but I didn't actually know existed. And that is pretty unreal. We had one night, like right after sunset. It was a little bit too late. Like the photo I took was ISO 6400 and really slow shutter speed. So there's some motion blur. So it's kind of just for the memory banks rather than like the portfolio. But it was an animal called the aardwolf,
Huh.
which is sort of like an aardvark wild dog, is my understanding. But like, I didn't even know that existed. And our guide driving the vehicle almost jumped out of his seat because he was so excited to see it. And like, that's just so contagious. Like a man who's lived his entire life in this area is thrilled to see this animal that I didn't even know was on this planet. And that kind of experience is what I live for.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, and do you have over the years have you had places that absolutely stand out as favorites. You have to go back. You know that it's you're addicted to it.
Yeah, Greenland is it. I went last year in October for the first time, and it was so unbelievably beautiful and remote, which are like my two favorite things. Like I love to see incredible landscapes, and I don't want anyone else there while I do it. Uh, and Greenland checked every single box, like jagged peaks, huge glaciers. I mean, I guess you could argue like the biggest glaciers on the planet, ocean, northern lights. It was incredible. So I've already been back like 6 months later. I'm going again in 2026. If I go 20 times, I don't think I'll be sick of it. Greenland is just unbelievable.
That's cool. Did you see? I know the answer to this, but you saw polar bears.
We actually didn't see
Oh,
polar bears
really?
while we were there. The first trip we took last year, we were camping, and so kind of mixed emotions. I love to see polar bears, but not while I'm sleeping in a tent. So I think
Right.
we actually it was like mandatory to carry a 30-06 with us at all times.
Wow.
So I think we're like fortunate we didn't see a polar bear because the outcome is like not there's no good outcome there. It's like I don't want to shoot the polar bear, but I also don't want to be scared for my own life. So I would love to go back and photograph polar bears, but I think that was good we didn't see one.
You have uh, one photo in particular that I love of a polar bear under the northern lights. Where was, I mean, I'm not asking about GPS coordinates, but
No.
where was this?
That's fair. It was so that one actually. I guess I should preface it by saying that it is a Photoshop composite.
Okay.
The caption does say that, but you've probably seen it shared around a lot, and the feature accounts never keep my caption, and so now
Right.
it's been
Yeah.
slightly misrepresented as a single exposure. But both the sky and the foreground, it's just two photos. I combined a Northern Lights sky with a foreground. They were shot in the same location in Churchill, Manitoba, within like 4 hours of each other. So it doesn't feel like super cheating. It's not like it was like a sky from Alaska and a polar bear from Norway
Sure.
or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, I was up in Churchill, Manitoba. I was at the Seal River Lodge, operated by Churchill Wild, which was an amazing experience. And yeah, we were photographing polar bears, and then that night the Northern Lights came out, and I was like, man, that would be cool to see together. So that's probably number one on my bucket list now is to try and make a shot like that happen.
Well, speaking of that location and social media, it what I see on social media when polar bears come up in my feed is usually something absolutely bananas happening in Churchill. Is it really that you know continuously exciting with polar bears, or is it really just social
Um,
media going
I
grabbing?
wouldn't say, yeah, I mean, that is definitely the question. I wouldn't say it's continuously exciting. Like the vast majority of the polar bear encounters up there, is it like laying in a snowbank or it walks by and maybe like looks at you out of the corner of its eye, but doesn't even slow down. And you get to shoot it as it walks past. Um, which is, in my opinion, that's a great way to experience a polar bear because there's
Yeah.
like it doesn't feel scary. It's just like, oh wow, the most beautiful plant animal on planet Earth. I got a photo. Great. See you later.
Yeah. Right.
Um, I have had some crazy experiences up there. One of the times we couldn't fly out to the lodge because there was a storm, so they sort of Airbnb'd us a place to stay, but there's no such thing as Airbnb. It's a town with only 800 residents.
Right.
So basically, it was like the owners of the company were like, "You're going to sleep on my friend's couch." And he had a polar bear in his driveway that night. And so I woke up to a man wearing nothing but boxers and carrying a shotgun, walking out the front, just like basically kicked open his front door and went, "Hey, get out of here!" And that was
That's
that, like my
wild.
yeah. And I was like, "Wow, this is the most like Northern Canada experience I think anyone's ever had."
Yeah, and I was gonna ask, it appears as though they come right into town there, and so I guess that is accurate.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely do. The town actually does like a really good job of deterring the bears humanely, which I think is very cool. Like the worst case scenario is for them to actually harm a polar bear. They have this really great like social structure for everyone in town, like hazes the bears so that they leave everyone alone without having to be injured. And if a bear is a nuisance, they They tranquilize it and then they relocate it outside of town far enough away that it'll pretty much never come back, which is it's really cool. They do an amazingly humane job of like coexisting with the bears and minimizing any sort of violence in either direction, bear on human or human on bear. But yes, they definitely will wander into town, and if you have left your chapstick in your car, your car is going to have a
Wow.
tough note, you know.
Yeah. Okay. That's exciting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it is.
are there other places that have been high up among your favorites?
Um, I got to do a project in spring of 2022 for the North Face. We went up to the Brooks Range, which is northern Alaska, and it's the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is like the most famous
Is this
region of the
the
Brooks
video with
Mountains.
Kit Delorier?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Sorry
Yeah,
to
so we
interrupt. I want to hear everything about this.
no, that's awesome. I'm honored that you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so we climbed and skied Mount Hoobley. We were the first team to ever ski that. So we laid down a first ascent, and then we ended up traversing on skis all the way north to Kaktovik to the Arctic Ocean, which to me that's just like a life changing experience to spend that amount of time somewhere that remote, like fully self sufficient. I was absolutely dominated by a team of professional athletes every single day. I'm in pretty good shape, but you know, Kit Delorier is a living goddess of a human. So
She did the
trying to
seven summits and
yeah, exactly. Trying to keep up with her, and I have like a 40-pound camera bag. I was like, okay, I got to hit the gym, but
yeah,
it was really cool.
that's very cool. And my my experience with that film is I have a 5 year old. She just turned 5, and when it came out on YouTube, it was around the time that I felt like she and I could like hang out in the morning on Saturday mornings and watch videos. And so when she was, not speaking very much, she'd say like Yellowstone and ski, and so we'd watch this Nat Geo film on Yellowstone and then two ski videos, and that was one of the ski videos. Um,
Oh, sweet, that's
yeah,
cool.
so this household has seen it like at least 100 times.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
That's why I was so familiar when you mentioned it. So it, there was a lot of things happening on that trip, and it came back to an environmental message, which I've found really interesting. Um, what were you guys focusing on in that respect?
Yeah, so everyone's hopefully somewhat familiar with ANWR, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and unfortunately, how it is the coastal plain is a pretty prominent oil and natural gas deposit. And so for the last like 40, 50 years, there's been a lot of contentious discussion about exploring and extracting those resources, which unfortunately would be devastating for the local environment. Like, unquestionably, you cannot extract petroleum from the ground and leave the surface untouched. It's just physically impossible. And in places like Texas, where you know it's a little bit warmer and they get some rainfall, the ground could eventually heal. But in the Arctic, it's a permafrost tundra. Those scars would last for thousands of years, and it's actually the breeding ground for one of the largest land migrations anywhere on the planet. The porcupine caribou herd travels several 100,000 individual members to this area for breeding, and so it would just be environmentally catastrophic. So our plan was to be apolitical. We weren't trying to take a pro or a con. Obviously, anybody in my industry tends to be conservation focused, but we wanted to be scientifically neutral. So the Bureau of Land Management had established a guideline for snow depth that would protect the tundra from equipment damage. And that was, it's been a couple years, so I don't remember, but I think it was like 8 inches of snow coverage. And so we teamed up with the University of Alaska at Fairbanks to measure the snow depth all the way across the Arctic plain to help inform them of their snow data. We went at the time of year when snowpack is on average at its thickest, and we measured on average like 2 inches, so like barely a quarter of the required coverage. And the data that we gathered was compiled with a bunch of other data that they'd been gathering over the last few years, and they actually ended up reversing the exploration decision and protecting that land. So it sounds like, well, prior to the current administration, there was going to be no drilling there, and now unfortunately the conversation has been reopened. But we did, I think, successfully gather data that was helpful in determining that this land would be irreparably damaged with natural gas exploration.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me in the film is that it wasn't even a question that it's not close to that threshold, and so a number that was agreed upon to as sort of a compromise, it seems, was is not met, and so
Yeah,
that made me hopeful, but there's some persistence for getting in there, and one of the things that doesn't when you look at something like the Tongass National Forest or the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, extraction folks talk about a low, a newer, lower impact technological approach to minimal, whatever. But at the end of the day, there's roads, you know, and
yeah.
roads are a big
There's
deal.
Yeah, there's no possible way to get equipment into wilderness without changing the wilderness. Like that's just the definition of wilderness is that there's not like roads and equipment. And so even if you like helicoptered a tractor in and dropped it off, that wilderness is then impacted just by that experience.
Yeah,
It's yeah, I'm with you. I feel like it's all a little bit like bad faith compromise from the people who want ultimate development and extraction. They say that they're compromising, but it's just realistic. Conservation, I think, is all or nothing. If you truly want wilderness, it needs to be wilderness.
yeah, and that's a place where I feel like there's been an agreed upon need for just pure preservation. Um, you know, there are hunting interests who want to conserve it for hunting or, other activities for the sake of activities. But in this case, it's like so special that it should just be preserved for its own sake and not because we want to enjoy it ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that is a tough sell in our like capitalistic environment to just say that like wilderness has inherent value as a standalone. You don't have to extract resources for financial gain. It like is valuable as it is, but that is the truth. It's just a tough pitch for the people currently in power, unfortunately.
I've been, I'm almost there. I want to be able to recommend this to other folks. It is called mm, Beyond the Summit, the film.
Yeah.
The North Face presents Beyond the Summit. So that's on YouTube. It's um, it's worth checking out 100 times. um, cool. Are there it I don't know how you became involved in that project, but do you try to at least at times tell a message about environmental issues or species through your work?
I do. I try as much as I can. It's a tough battle because that same capitalist society structure that I was just railing against is unfortunately also the same one I live in. And so I do have to do projects that pay the bills, and unfortunately, conservation doesn't really. And
Right.
so I do. I try to be fairly outspoken on social media about it whenever possible, but I do limited like actual field work related to conservation because you have to find a company like North Face and even that one, they wanted to make a biopic about Kit Delorier, who's like one of their most exceptional athletes on their ambassador team. And the environmental storyline was her idea because it's something she's passionate about. And so we were fortunate we were able to get, North Face spent a lot of money to fly 7 people into Anwar for 2 weeks. Because that's a tough pitch if you try to go to like Microsoft. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
why do we care? That doesn't matter at all. So trying to get the funding for conservation projects is always such a ridiculous uphill battle. And I don't think I maybe can talk about it yet, but I'm in the planning phases of another film environmentally. centered, and we're doing the fundraising, and it's going to be kind of the same thing. It's like the outlet is basically like it's going to go to film festivals, and then people see your name. Do
Right.
brands care about that? Is that a good enough return on investment? It's
Right.
tough.
Yeah. Um, that is tough. Do you have bucket list destinations? I'm sure you do.
I yeah. Oh God, yeah. I'm really fortunate actually. Like Africa, Antarctica, and Greenland were the top three, and I've checked all three of those off in the last 2 years, which is really cool. Now I would say I've never been to New Zealand, which is ridiculous to say. And then I'm really interested in going to the places that are a little bit more off the beaten path. Like I'm super interested in Bhutan, which is like, a little bit less explored. Anywhere up in like the Karakoram range, like the Pakistan area.
Yeah.
Um, I also was talking with a tourism organization in North Korea, and then Autumn said, "What's wrong with you? Please stop that."
That's
Yeah. I mean, I was like, listen, I can take a photo no one's ever taken before. And she's like,
right.
or never come home. And I was like, all right, that's fair,
Yeah,
fair
like I
enough.
was I was just about to say like, no man, do it, but then I stopped myself. like
I mean, it would be really cool. They have beautiful mountains and they have like crazy waterfalls. I could definitely take a photo that no one's ever taken, at least not that's been published in the Western world. But yeah, I don't know. The risk to reward ratio there is pretty tough.
yeah. I mean if you take some like Michael Jordan licensed, souvenirs, you might be able to buy some time.
It's
If you
true. Like
if you get in
Brad,
trouble.
Brad my way up.
um, this drive you have, that you've alluded to, where does that come from? Like, did you watch Indiana Jones, or is there something that just keeps fueling this, um, that keeps you moving? Because at the end of the day, it's exhausting work. It's rewarding, but it's tiring, and it's hard to be away from home for a lot of people. And there's natural weather elements and on and on and on. What drives you to take yourself out of the comfort and go to these places and work hard when you're there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can attribute my drive to my parents. My dad was a reporter and he was in media, and so he was really good about doing impromptu bring your kid to work days with me. Like, I got to go to the radio station and meet John Glenn, or
Whoa.
like, or Tom Brady, or stuff like that. Like all of these like wildly successful people, because my dad would be interviewing them, and he'd be like, "Hey, do you want to talk to my like 10-year-old son?" And so I think from an early age, I got this like really intense exposure to like highly successful and highly driven people, and I kind of realized that like you have to like I don't know if anybody has that fire innately. It's sort of something that you have to like foster within yourself a little bit. Even the like most motivated and successful people still have to like put effort into doing the thing. And so I think that helped a lot. And then throughout all of that, despite all of those people, the most like driven person I've ever met is my mom. And so I think like that exposure on both sides of the equation. My mom absolutely cannot sit still. And if there's something that needs to be done, she's going to do it, to the point where like, okay, so this is my favorite story about my mom. She's just like, she gets it done. Canadian geese or Canada geese, everyone's like always afraid that they're going to get bit because they're just like grumpy turds.
Yeah.
They're like jerks. Well, one day at the park, one of those was coming up to us and like doing their like hiss with their wings out, like very much telling us to leave. And my mom grabbed its beak with her fingers and said no. And and then it just like turned around and left. Like my mom's the she's the only person on planet Earth that I have seen scold a Canada goose. Like she pinched its beak shut and said, "Stop it," and then it left. And I was like, "Wow, okay, you can do anything you set your mind to."
That's wild.
Yeah. So that's where I get it from, I think.
That's pretty cool. Um, I'm only mentioning this because the last guest on this podcast was my brother Gabe. He he's 11 years younger than me, and we grew up in DC. And when he was a kid, we'd have a lot of guests over for dinner. Not like not like well-known people. we
Yeah.
we just have a lot of dinner guests, and when he was like a toddler or something, he's like maybe 5 or something. He's like, Mom, can we have John Glenn over for dinner? And she's like, What? John Glenn? Like you don't we don't know John Glenn, neither do you. Like, how do you know who John Glenn is? And my brother had a meltdown and was like, No, like John Glenn, we need to have John Glenn over for dinner. And it was like comical because how in the world does this little kid know who John Glenn is? Not that kids shouldn't, but it just was a curveball. And anyway, sometime later, my mom was cleaning his room and found a photograph, which we now have framed, of John Glenn, and it said "To Gabe, best wishes, John Glenn" or something like that. So he was
Well, so he like reached out to John Glenn.
he had met John Glenn at school or something, and like was really psyched about it, and we had no idea.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it was hilarious when we discovered that he actually did have a secret life.
That's awesome. I mean, that's so cool though, because like I think every little boy wants to be an astronaut at some point. So the
Yeah.
fact that he actually got to like meet one, I mean, that's one of those life-changing experiences at that age.
Well, I did notice on your bucket list online you do have the moon.
Oh yeah, I mean that's number one. And I've subtweeted at Elon a couple times
Hmm.
just to see, but I don't know. Someday we'll get there.
I mean, I think that's a good idea. He
Yeah,
wants for I mean for marketing it'd be great to have you on the you know a space flight.
yeah. I don't. I don't want to like editorialize too much, but I don't see eye to eye with him on very many subjects. So I don't know how far I would get in the interview process, but I'm willing to suck it up for the opportunity to go to space. I think that would be the absolute coolest possible thing.
I think it would be respectable and authentic if you outlined some differences with him before expressing shared interests in the moon. And I think that
That's true.
he should then
Oh yeah,
approve it. Yeah.
like building bridges, kind of like crossing the divide.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Okay.
we share an interest in the moon. um, I don't, I've got, a lot of us do an obsession with gear. I'd like to be the cool person who's like, oh, I don't care about gear, but I do, and
Yeah.
a lot of us do. When you're planning for a trip, and I guess it's gonna vary so much, especially if you're doing astro work versus going to the Brooks Range or whatever. Are there gear staples that you have when it comes to a trip that would, let's say, a trip that would have both wildlife and landscape opportunities?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I do think that's where a camera that is like really versatile is the one. You know, like every camera company, I'm a Sony ambassador, I'm sure you know, but even Canon and Nikon, they all have like a specialty camera for wildlife or like, you know, it's like fastest burst speeds, but maybe lower resolution. And they have one that's like high resolution, but really slow sensor readout speeds. So it's bad for moving objects, but good for landscapes. And then they all have the flagship. For Sony, it's the Alpha One, now the Alpha One Mark II. Canon, it's what the it used to be the 1DX, but now it's the what is it, the R3 or whatever. I think that's where those cameras shine, is like a versatile camera that's kind of like the middle ground between high resolution and speed. It's like the best of both worlds. It kind of sucks because they cost twice as much as the other cameras, but to me, that's like the best starting point. And then just versatile lenses. Like the Holy Trinity has that nickname for a reason. Um, it's I don't know. I could talk about that for another hour because you're getting right into the heart of like the number one challenge I face in my career is like, what do you bring? When we went to Greenland, for example, we were only allowed to have 40 pounds of gear
Wow.
total, including our camera gear, including all of our clothes. And so it's like you had to make really tough decisions about what you're bringing. And you just basically you're going to have to make sacrifices. You're going to have to choose a lens that's versatile versus like two specialist lenses. Like you're not going to be shooting the Northern Lights on your 14 millimeter f1.8. You're going to have to just use your 16 to 35 f2.8. So you have less light, but that lens is useful in many other scenarios instead of specialty. That's kind of the choices you have to make, really.
For is it maybe this is just me misreading? It looks like when you want to get up close on wildlife, you're going with a 400.
Yeah, I have the 400 f2.8, which is my favorite wildlife lens optically. That's definitely a great example of like not versatile at all.
Yeah.
But visually, that thing is absolutely incredible.
And I've found when I'm using a 600, like I can't get far enough away from animals at times. It's
Yeah.
it becomes even less versatile. I end up using a 300 more than the 600. Um,
Yeah, I get that question a lot from people. They're like, "Should I get the 400 or the 600? Which one do you like more?" And the answer is just it. I've had so many scenarios with the 400 where I wish I had more reach, and I've had so many scenarios with the 600 where I wish I had less reach.
right.
The grass is always greener, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like if you're going to Greenland, you got to pick one or the other on that one. Um,
Yeah, on Greenland, I think I just brought my 100 to 400. It was just like I'm going to have less aperture, but that's useful for everything from people to landscapes to potentially wildlife. Whereas the 400 is kind of like wildlife, and that's it.
yeah, that's true. Um, are there one of the things I'd love to hear from people is, there's this one or two little pieces of gear that maybe are essential, that like an Altoids tin. I'm just making something up because it's in front of me, but is there any little thing that you wouldn't leave home without?
Ooh, that's such a good question. It really depends on the scenario in terms of like, I was going to say like my filters, but that's really depending on if I'm doing like long exposures or video or something. You know what I think it is a multi-tool.
Yeah.
The number of times I've needed like an Allen key or a flathead in the field and been so glad that I have one literally carabinered to my backpack. That's it. Like, man, if that base plate comes loose and you can't tighten it down, you are in a tough spot.
That's a good point. And you're trying to use other things to tighten it, and it's not working, and it becomes more of a focus than the shot. That's a good one.
Yeah, exactly.
For those who are inspired by your work, and might want to head into a similar path, do you have any advice or tips for those who are like, what Nate's doing is awesome. I want to do something similar, not copy him, but explore the world and take photos in a similar spirit. What advice or tips might you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. The unfortunate reality of this industry is that in order to do the work, you have to prove that you can do the work. I mean, I guess that's sort of true of any job. It's sort of like you need to have job experience, which really sucks because if you want to like take photos of polar bears, how do you prove that you can do that without already having seen a polar bear?
Right.
And so the reality is you just have to like practice enough to where your portfolio is convincing to the degree where somebody will pay you for it. Like if I wanted to get an assignment for astrophotography and I was just getting started, you have to go out like 50 nights over the summer and take astro photos until you have them like dialed in. You have to, first of all, you have to have astro photos that look so good that somebody's willing to pay you to do it. And then you also need to be comfortable and competent enough that when they're paying you to do it, it's not like a gamble on their part. You can't just be like, oops, I fumbled my way through it and most of these are bad, but I got one. So if they're writing you, say a $5,000 check, that's just not going to be sufficient. So to me, that's just like that. It all comes down to that. Like every single aspect of the industry comes down to like, are you good enough that you're worth paying for comfortably for these businesses? And then pitching yourself, you just kind of have to have the proof of concept. Like, is that a photo you're capable of taking? Have you taken a similar one before, and can you do it reliably?
Yeah, you have to be able to get the shot. Um, that's good. That's good. That's good advice. Yeah. Speaking of those who are learning to go to new places and get those shots and try new things and learn, which is so much of the fun. You've got workshops. Um, Share with us generally what your workshops are like and some of the places you've been, and then What's up on the calendar?
Yeah. I think the workshops are really fun. So basically, we just try to go somewhere beautiful, obviously, and then usually we have like a specific focus. And I'm actually in the process of outlining next year's workshops right now. Um, so actually, there's only three on the calendar, and they're all three astrophotography focused, which is kind of funny. The first one's going to be in Moab, Utah, so Arches National Park and Canyonlands National Park. And then, well, I guess the first one is in February in Norway. I guess that kind of already feels like it's past, but it's just because
Right.
we've finished all of the pre-production on that one, so we're ready to go. But yeah, so the Norway one is like Northern Lights focused. Obviously, if there's no Northern Lights, we're going to take star photos, but that feels pretty disappointing when you're that far north. um, and then Arches National Park, Canyonlands National Park, and then in September we're doing Mount Rainier National Park, also astrophotography. But all three of those locations are amazing during the daytime too. So it ends up being a little bit more versatile. Some daytime, like sunrise, sunset stuff, some stars, hopefully some northern lights in Norway. But they're really fun. We basically, we have all the locations scouted, so it just takes all of the like headache out of planning a trip for a new photographer. Like we book your hotel, we have the cars rented. All you have to do is show up. We drive you to somewhere beautiful. And then we help explain, we don't just like walk around and change your camera settings. What we like to do is try and get people to leave with the skills to take these photos on their own. So like I'll say what settings I'm using, but then explain why I chose those settings, the pros and cons of the settings I chose. There's always like for night sky photography, I personally prefer a really cool white balance because I love the like blues and purples in the stars, but not everybody does. Some people like it around like 4,500 Kelvin. And so we'll talk about all that in the field. And then we go back and we do post processing, we do some editing work so people can see the difference between the cool white balance, like 3,500 Kelvin versus 5,000 Kelvin. What does that look like? How do you change it if it's a raw photo? Like in Lightroom, can you reset that if you accidentally mess up? And our goal is that people go home feeling significantly more confident in their skills. And it's been really fun. It's so fun for us because it's always people who are like wanting to check something off their bucket list, and it's so contagious to be with somebody who's having a life experience with you. We've had like grown men cry in the field, and then we've had people go home and win photo contests or
Neat.
have a gallery show from photos they took on one of our trips, which is just so cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Um, and I see Botswana's on there for 2027, so that sounds exciting. It gets you back there.
Oh yeah, we're really excited. That one's actually already almost sold out, which is also really exciting because
Cool.
we were kind of nervous. We've never done a trip there, and so it was a little bit. It's always a little bit of a risk putting something new on the workshop calendar, but that one's been met with a lot of enthusiasm, which is really fun.
That's great. We've talked a lot about your work. Where can folks go to learn more?
Yeah, my name online is Nate in the Wild, and honestly, if you type that into Google, it'll probably bring up
Yeah,
all the websites.
it does.
So, yeah, Instagram, website, Twitter, Facebook, whatever threads. I don't know. There's so many now. They'll come up.
Awesome. Well, I do encourage folks to go and check all that out, learn more, um, look at these workshops. Like, since I've been scrolling around on there this morning, I'm like, this would be a good one. I'd love to see snow colors affected by the northern lights in Norway. That sounds fun. So I encourage people to go and see more, and especially on Instagram where you're pretty active too.
Yeah. Yep. Although I haven't posted on there in like a week and a half because I've been busy, but
We
I
just
need to be
had
better about that one.
it's the holiday season, so it's good. I think it's pretty active. Well,
Yeah.
thanks
Yeah. It's good enough.
thanks for coming on. I'd love to have you on again, and I appreciate you sharing so much of your experience and a variety of things with us. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Hopefully, we'll even run into each other out in the wild someday.
That'd be great.